On this episode, we're going to talk about how to market a sports brand properly and how to stay relevant to the fan base.
With so many different platforms,
Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube,
and their purposes evolving daily, navigating social media can be, well, complicated. Welcome to the Social Media Sucks podcast from Cubco.
Social media. Really sucks.
Where we unpack the latest trends and help remove the suck from social media.
Welcome back to the Social Media Sucks podcast by Cubco. If you ever experience the fear of missing out when it comes to social media and marketing trends, then this is definitely the podcast for you. We'll help you level up your marketing and business skills by covering the latest topic within social media and through our inspiring guests. But before we start, if you're not already subscribed to our podcast or YouTube channel, please do so now, because it really helps us get this amazing education and inspiration out there to more marketers and business people just like yourself. So let's get into today's episode. And with me is Mads Jefsen, who is the marketing director for F.C Copenhagen, which is Football Club Copenhagen. And of course, our CEO, Chris Carlsberg.
That's me.
Big welcome.
Thank you so much.
Nice to have you guys today.
Yeah,
Good to be here.
having me.
So let's talk about sponsorship and media campaigns for sports brands. But before we dive into that, can you please give us a little introduction to yourself and your career, Mads?
Yes, as you said, my name is Mads. I've been with FC Copenhagen for 3.5 years. Before that, I was in a big publishing house here in Copenhagen, part of People Group called People's Press, working with traditional physical books, but also ebooks and audiobooks. Took the step to go to FC Copenhagen because I have a personal passion within football as well. It's always been a dream for me to actually work not only with something I have an authentic passion for, but actually football specifically. And the opportunity was there.
Nice.
And I've been started as a campaign manager in the club, working with campaigns for all our business areas, and now I'm the marketing director. So also oversee some of the more strategic elements of our marketing initiatives.
Awesome.
That's
Do you
great.
have any advice you can give people who one day strive to be in this similar kind of position?
Understanding.
Work your face off. Work your face
Never
off
see your
every
family.
single day. No, love football. I guess that's got to be one.
I mean, having a passion for football
Yeah.
and understanding also the business side of it and being curious. I think no matter what you're working with, be curious.
Yeah.
And something that maybe doesn't go too well hand in hand with the values of the club is actually, from a personal perspective, being quite humble as well. Understand that you have to take some smaller steps in the beginning and again be curious, and then at some point you also acknowledge your own worth and make some bigger steps.
Yeah,
Wow.
because starting out as
Well
a
said.
campaign manager and then working your way up in 3.5 years, I mean,
As an example.
that's a good, fast paced promotion.
Yeah.
So that's really good to see. I'm glad to see you do that, and it must be a tribute to your talent and what you've
Hopefully.
done. So hopefully, yeah, that's good. You didn't sleep your way to the top, right? No.
With 2 kids, no sleep at all.
No, you slept. Yeah, you literally slept. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
But before we dive into the juicy conversation about all that, can you tell our audience a little bit more about the football club? To make sure the international audience knows what it is, because I'm sure the Danish audience definitely know.
Yeah,
And I would say hopefully the international
it's
audience
getting more,
knows as
right?
well.
Like you guys
Yeah.
are making waves.
I mean, we are the biggest club in Scandinavia and the Nordics.
Yeah.
We have 14 Danish championship over the 30-year history of the club. Just celebrated the 30-year anniversary on the 1st of July.
Congratulations.
And numerous cup trophies as well, and Champions League, Europa League, Conference League. Hopefully this year we're going into the group stages of the Champions League again. We are sort of the Copenhagen team, and we have a big fan base, probably the biggest in Scandinavia as well, and also an international fan base, but of course mainly rooted in Copenhagen.
Yeah. It's
Thanks.
definitely grown a lot over the last, I'd say like 10 years ago when I got to Scandinavia or got to Denmark, FC Co was a different beast. I think it was like very Danish focused, and I think it's gotten more and more international recognition, obviously through you guys' hard work, and I think it's definitely moved into also being a media brand in its own, like as we'll get to, I think, which is many sports brands are moving in that direction, but it's also good to see you guys really go head first into that and sort of become that media brand that a lot of people want to work with, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Let's dive into the marketing in a football club. So from your experience, what makes marketing in a football club unique?
I think what makes it unique is the fact that your customers, we call them fans because they're fans first and foremost, but they're also customers. They have a lifelong relationship with the club and the brand or the business, whatever you want to call it. Of course, you will find other brands where you have a lifelong relationship as well. But I think the sort of the threshold for how we engage with our fans / customers on an everyday basis is totally different from a sort of a normal business.
Yeah, retail.
They're here, the fans, through everything we do.
Yeah.
And they're very critical, and they should be, both positively but also negatively. And that's of course part of driving the business. And the other side of that, you have people like me within the club that need to make some decisions and move the club in a direction.
Yeah.
Of course, incorporating the opinions of the fans, but also sometimes taking some steps that you maybe not the most popular decision. Other times, this is going to be a home run.
Yeah.
So I think that relationship and the engagement with the fans is what makes it totally unique.
Yeah. You deal a lot with passion within the community,
yes, there's
right?
a lot of
Like
feelings involved. There's a lot of
exactly.
history.
Yeah.
And for me also, I fully understand that there's definitely a huge number of fans of a club that have a much better understanding of the club's history and sort of the fundamentals than I have.
Yeah.
And how can I use that in my work and engage with them?
Makes sense. We had Benjamin from the head of marketing for Astralis on the podcast probably a couple months ago, and he said the same thing. It's funny, the fans are so passionate and they will tell you their opinion very quickly, like if they love something or if they hate something. And they'll be very they'll be very honest with you, but they'll still be very in your corner. Like they still want the team to succeed,
of course,
right? And so even though they might be hating on you, and we'll use those in quotation marks, they're still so passionate about what you guys do, and they want to just see.
They want the club to succeed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and progress. Of course, they have huge ambitions for the club.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the key sort of differences from other business. And then of course also the fact that if I'm working on a big campaign and working towards some goals, I'm still. I cannot affect the 90 minutes on the pitch, even though I want to sometimes, but I'm not invited to play. That's out of my hands. Yeah. And it definitely, if I have something planned for the following Monday, and God forbid it, we lose a game, I need to adjust.
Yeah.
And I have no influence on what happens on that pitch. Of course, I can help fill the stands and have sort of a great atmosphere that can lift our players, etc., but the actual game is out of my hands.
Yeah,
that's interesting, right? Like that is a very unique part of being a sports brand and doing marketing for it. It's like you literally have to take into account how well are you doing, because you got to maybe change messaging or change strategy up or think about, okay, it's also like your season might end earlier than you wanted to, so you can't really plan out a full year of activities because hey, we might not moving on to other stages. Like we have to sort of take that into account, right? So it's much more challenging than
there's a lot of human factors.
Not more challenging, but just different challenges than other sort of brands, right?
So where does the strategy, idea, and campaign start and end in Football Club Copenhagen?
I mean, it depends on whether you look at it like a business level or but let's talk marketing, I guess. It's actually very dependent on what sort of area of the business we're also looking at, I would say. Because one thing is our ticketing, like marketing of our ticket sales, season tickets, and subscriptions, which is becoming a big part of our business. Then you look at merchandise also, but sort of commonly how do you say it?
The red thread.
Yeah, the red thread is of course having as you said before, an understanding what is sort of the climate right now. How are we performing? What is we can all like we have a big fan base. As I said, all the fans are not always agreeing on everything we do, so it doesn't make sense to just listen to one opinion.
Right.
But we tend to look, of course, at sort of the backbone of the club. What is the strategy? What are the values? Where do we want to be? Where are we right now? What makes sense from there?
So it starts in the values, essentially, like.
Yeah, and always remembering sort of what do we represent, because we are the biggest, and we need to be the biggest and the boldest of the clubs, and we need to sort of set the standard.
Yeah.
And I need to have that mindset in our marketing activities as well.
Yeah.
But sort of very classical. It's not, on that sense, it's not different, I guess, from other businesses. Having an understanding of the target group, what do you want to achieve, and how do we get there?
Yeah.
What are the most efficient and effective tools or tactics to get there?
Yeah.
Be it season tickets, merchandise, or activation of a brand partnership or something like that.
You said something about understanding the sort of your target audience. I mean, you guys must have a lot of data on your target audience, because they are so passionate and they are also coming to you physically in huge numbers.
Yeah.
So, and you also have a ticketing sort of set up, so you understand where are they, like, when are they coming, what games are they most interested in.
Yeah.
You've got some online activity on your own platforms, on your social channels. So
exactly.
You must do a lot of community management listening as well. So you guys have maybe a really good sort of ear to the ground when it comes to your guys' audience. What sort of opportunities does that give you guys?
Of course, as you said, we do have a lot of data, and that's also one of the areas where we have really progressed a lot over the last 4 to 5 years. Because one thing is having the data, but actually structuring it and having it available and be able to act on it is a different thing. And that's what we have done. So now that provides us sort of a view into the fan base, and of course that provides the opportunity to have some things confirmed. Also some things that maybe there was some truth within the organization that actually changed, because you have the data available to actually see what's going on. As an example, so what if when we're talking like waiting time in our food and beverage sales, or looking at a specific game, so at what time do people arrive to the game on a given stand when we play against a top tier team compared to a lower tier team, or when it's raining or it's not raining. So actually having understanding, you can use that, of course, for your setup for the game day in terms of security and how many stalls do you need to open, and all the operation side of it. And on the marketing side, of course, it provides the opportunity to actually have as you said, a solid understanding of the fan base as a whole, but also the different segments. And we work with persona groups within the fan base. So understanding, one thing is understanding of fans as football fans, FCK fans, but they also have a life on the side. What are they doing? What sort of brands are they engaging with? What are their demands? And how can we sort of build some business on top of that, or maybe create partnerships around it also?
So you guys are able to like look at the data and say, okay, we should. Does that direct your sort of not acceptance, but does that direct who you guys talk to in terms of partnerships, or? And is that like a sales model? Like you have salespeople going after those partnerships, or is it more organic? Does it come to you, or how does that work?
It's both. I would say there's still a lot of like incoming in terms of partnership, but we do also more and more, as you said, okay, we have this segment within the fan base. We know we have a high relevance for a given brand. Maybe it's their like primary target audience, or maybe it's a group of people where they're not actually engaging, but they want to go. So for example, a pretty large amount or large percentage of our fan base is young male adults with like 13 to 24. They don't watch a lot of Flow TV, and they're like, in a general sense, pretty hard to get to. So that's where there becomes a demand for some of the brands that actually want to engage with these people.
And they trust advertising a lot less now. So it's like, I think that's what's really, really interesting also about the position that you guys stand in, is that, you know, as a media platform, you probably have more of a trusted position within certain groups than somebody else does. So it's a nice opportunity for brands that are having a hard time maybe reaching that target audience or expanding into a particular audience, that you already have like a gateway, a trusted gateway to those audiences. And
that's where we have to remember, as I said before, those people are there for the football first and foremost. And we and the partners need to accept this and understand it, but then also find the opportunities. So if we do it right, over time we can definitely create, be it awareness or preference of what we want to achieve with a given brand partnership together, if we do it in the right way. So we have the access, we have the platforms, we have the fans, but how do we actually create content and campaigns and activations that these people are actually willing to spend their time on?
Which is really cool. I mean, you guys act like an agency like us. Like, I really think that's a neat sort of similarity, is that you guys probably think about creative strategy and like how do we do this partnership that would actually like engage our fans and be entertaining and actually maybe could sell something, or is this about awareness, or is this about like, what is this about that we're doing, right? So you would approach a partnership like we would with a client. It's like they need a concept, they need content, they need a content strategy, they need a paid media strategy attached to that. So you guys operate like a mini agency, or not, maybe not even mini agency. Like, how many people are you guys just in your team, or just in your group?
I mean, in my team, which is the marketing team, we're 7 people, and then probably the same number within what we call communications and content. So altogether, around 14, 15 people.
Yeah, so you're like, you're a fairly sizable agency.
And then you also have an event organization, which is probably the same. So altogether, we have quite a significant number of people that can actually work as an agency, for example.
Full
sometimes
service.
we do that when we see a potential in a given, like we want a sponsor or partner within this business area, and we don't have one today. How can we actually approach it? We build the case. And other times is, of course, is the brand approaching us and providing, just as I assume you guys work. So what are your challenges? What are the KPIs? What are your target groups? And what do you want to achieve? And then we build a solution from that. And that can contain everything from, content production, which is one of our key areas where we have really, really high expertise. But also actually sort of the distribution side of it. So email marketing, paid media activities, etc. Where everything is done in-house in the club.
How do you manage all these sponsorships? Because I guess they are very different in nature depending on the brands you work with, and actually you sell access to fans for these brands. So how does it vary between your sponsorships when you partner with brands?
I mean, it varies, again, similar to, I guess, the brands you're working with. It really gets down to when we have the initial talks, like, what do you want to achieve? Why are you coming to FC Copenhagen? What is the objective? Because there's a big difference between, like, is it a new brand trying to make their way in Denmark and we have to build awareness? Or is it a well-known brand, established brand that want to be sort of part of the experience, or doing something totally different? So that is the most crucial thing, is to get an understanding. And I mean, I'm sometimes surprised, to be honest, that it's more difficult to get those answers that you would expect. But it's a good challenge when we have these talks. Say, okay, so what do we need to achieve when we have a talk in a year or 2 or 3? What do we need to achieve? Where do we need to be? Instead of just looking at what do we have on the shelf and then providing that, let's build something that actually solves some problems. And that can be selling products. So we might do a collaboration where we also have a retail element within our fan shop. Are we building awareness? Okay, how do we do that, etc. So we actually cater the specific solution to the problem.
I think that, something comes to mind for me is like, have you guys ever had to turn away a brand that you're just like, we don't want to even touch this? It's not in our value set, or it's just not interesting? Like, has that ever happened?
It does happen, of course, both in terms of like, what do we represent as a club, and what do we want our, what do we want to back, so to say? Because as we said before, we are sort of selling access to the fan base. So
Yeah.
we also
You need to safeguard it.
because we are sort of a spokesperson for the brands we work with.
Yeah.
And then of course we also work with brands that have exclusivity within a given category, for example. So we have Audi as an example as a partner. We're not going to work with other car brands when we have Audi.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like a brand ambassador kind of thing within influencer marketing. It's always, a case.
And I mean, one thing is, it wouldn't make sense for me or for anyone, but when you view it from the fan perspective, it would also be very like untrustworthy, I would say, because okay, you're promoting this car brand and this car brand at the same time. What are you actually representing as a club?
Yeah.
So those are some of the thoughts we also put into that process. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. Is there a brand out there you're like, oh man, I really want to work with these guys, but haven't had a chance yet?
Oh.
Give them a shout out. We'll see if we can make it happen.
Good
Or tag
question.
them. Yeah.
Good question. I mean, I really, to be honest, I feel that we're working with a lot of cool brands, and there's also a lot of cool brands in the pipeline. So it's hard to think of one, to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
I can think of some. Like actually, I think one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking is like, there's a big discussion right now with men's mental health, and actually, you guys tap into a very important target audience, which actually needs some of that messaging and sort of support right now. Because we work with a number of brands that are actually in that sort of space and health, and one of the big topics has been sort of men's mental health. Yeah. It could be interesting. Do you guys do anything in that space already, or not that you can think
Not
of?
specifically on a partnership, no. But I think it's something that we are aware of. What we talked about or talk about sometimes is actually like loneliness as well.
Yeah.
Because we are aware that people are actually going to football alone as well, and we feel that's amazing. But how can we actually, as a big brand, also create a community for people that are maybe don't have a large group of friends or family to actually go to the games?
Yeah.
And that's where we also tend to look at the other partners that we are working with. How can we actually collaborate to have a bigger impact?
Yeah.
So be it like on a sustainable project or something like that. How can we, as a club, but also with our partners, make a big impact?
That's nice.
And also open up we recently recreated a like food waste project together, or there's a organization called Stop Madspild that are now utilizing Parken, the national stadium, 3 days a week. They get a lot of food delivered from Coop, and people can come by, Copenhageners can come by and pick up free food that would go to waste.
That's great.
And I think we are providing the facilities. But again, as I said, how can we be relevant not only on the match day, but the other days as well? Now we're opening up the stadium, just providing some facilities for the Copenhageners to have some food that would have gone to waste. And hopefully in the future we'll have a lot more projects like this, not only in terms of sustainability, but various, be it mental health or what it might be.
That's good.
That's
Love it.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the media campaigns you guys have with brands, for instance, like on a strategic level. When you do commercial activities with brands, for instance, you partner a lot with Carlsberg. And so what's the strategic considerations when you guys launch a campaign?
I mean, as an example with Carlsberg have been within the club for more than 20 years.
One of your oldest partners.
And
right?
and actually sort of, I would say, a part of the club. And that, in my opinion, proves the point that over time you can actually create some magic.
Yeah.
But back to your question, when it's with partners, of course, we also dependent on what are the strategic priorities from the partner that we're working with. So again, what do we want to achieve on a long term? And then when we're talking a campaign, what are we focusing on? And what do we want to achieve? And then, of course, there's also an element of finding the right balance between because we are the spokesperson, and it's us sending out the messaging. But the brands that we're working with also have some guidelines and some things we need to consider in our communications content.
It's also a
production and
big
everything.
challenge, like taking into account their
Yes.
brand guidelines, their tone of voice, their
Exactly.
styles, their wants, their wishes.
So a lot of
and marrying that
the
together.
talks I have with the brands is saying, okay, I understand that your general guidelines are like this.
Yeah.
So if you were to buy ad space on Facebook or somewhere else, you would stick to those guidelines.
Yeah.
And I fully understand why. But
This
if
is
you
a
want to
bit different.
engage the people that are
Yeah.
FCK fans and are
Yeah.
here for the football and the club,
You have to
then
do-
we need to adapt.
Yeah.
And how do we do that in a sense that is FCK, but also something that the guidelines from the given brand can actually
Yeah.
tolerate? So that's where we have quite a lot of back and forwards.
Yeah.
But generally, I would say there's a good understanding of the fact that we need to adjust, and then it's us being sort of a mediator and guiding the brands on how to do it in the best possible way. And one of the key words within that is relevance. We need to stay relevant, but we also understand that we're not always relevant for the whole fan base. It
Yeah.
might be a specific segment that this given campaign is relevant for.
Yeah.
And that's again going back to the brand partners. Say, okay, yes, I understand that you want to have the biggest possible reach, but if this is the objective and this is the target group, I think we should go this direction.
Yeah.
Um,
Do those strategic sort of considerations also trickle down to the players in a sense? Like, I've done a little bit of work with the football sort of industry, and one of the big things like I've seen your kind of brands do is also you're selling a platform from the team's perspective, but you also are selling a platform player-wise in some cases, depending on the players' contracts and things
Yeah.
like that. How much does that trickle down to players? Like, do brands come to you and say, hey, we actually want this player as part of this content?
Yeah.
And then you have to sort of negotiate with the player, or is it a part of their contract, or how does that actually work?
Yeah. So part of the player's contract is we have sort of the commercial rights. So we can work with the players, with the brands that we're working with, and with the FCK brand, of course. And yes, there's always, I would say, like a request for specific players. But it also changes depending on who's like the most favorite right now. But that's where
Yeah.
we also have a mediator role, or like a advisor role, to actually say, okay, if we are doing a campaign in this direction, we suggest we're using this guy because he actually has a general interest in your
Yeah.
brand, or we know like players are also different in terms of how they perform on camera and everything. So again, that's where we have to be an advisor and give the best possible advice. And from there, it's actually we have some rules, and there are also some like contractual rules in terms of when do we need to book the given players for campaigns and briefing them and everything, and of course giving them an understanding of what are they being part of here, and why are we doing what we're doing.
Why is it relevant for them?
Yeah, and then of course you have to again adapt. Injuries, everything comes to play.
Yeah.
And you need to find a different solution.
Maybe there's something funny in them being injured that you can use.
Yeah.
You got to get around in a car now because you can't bike. How about you take the Audi instead?
See opportunities and everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of, is there any challenges that you're facing when it comes to these sponsorships and media campaigns? And after that, any opportunities you want to pursue further?
I think actually the same thing is both a challenge and an opportunity. Is the fact that specifically in sort of the area of the club that I'm in, this whole idea of us being a media brand or a marketing platform, or you can call it what you want to call it, is growing, and it's becoming a big part of the business within the business. But on the other hand, we have to remember that we're a football club, and actually finding that balance is sort of the magic for me. Also making sure that we stay focused on the fact that we're a football club, but also the potential that comes with that in terms of having the large fan base and the channels and the opportunity around like building a business around that. So that's something that we focus a lot on. Again, not overusing the fact that we are a media or marketing platform, but by the end of the day, we are a football club. We need to win football matches, and we need to be an even bigger club tomorrow than we are today. So that's sort of the balance that I'm working a lot with.
Yeah, I think one of the things that it's also really cool about what you guys are doing is expanding beyond being a football club and being also a lifestyle brand. And we talked a little bit about that before the podcast started, but can you speak a little bit about the journey to do that? What are those steps that you guys have taken that others can learn from? Because I think a lot of brands want to not just be but to go beyond their current scope and be a lifestyle brand. What has really helped you guys do that, and what advice would you give those who want to do that?
I mean, I think we're still on a journey to get there, and it's something we are focusing a lot on. We're not we haven't reached the goal yet. But of course, it's first and foremost a realization that for us, we have a match day, or like everything around the matches where we are highly relevant. But how do we actually, the other days in the week, how do we stay relevant, and how is the brand part of the everyday for our fans, and hopefully also new fans in the future. And what we are also looking at is, of course, we have the name Copenhagen within our club name. We are part of Copenhagen. How can we actually merge these two things even more together and becoming a bigger part of the city through collaborations, but also the brands we work with, municipality and everything, to actually have a presence in the city even more than we have today. Yeah. Then, as we also talked about earlier, in terms of merchandise, as an example, traditional merchandise is never going away, like scarves, flags, and everything that you use to show the club colors. But it would also be, and that's where we are moving in direction now, that you can actually go to your grandma's birthday wearing the club colors without looking like a traditional football fan.
Can you show our audience your shirt, for instance?
So I'm wearing a t-shirt from Le Deux, one of the brands that we're working with, where we actually made a collaboration or collection where we use the club colors in a more subtle way to allow fans actually also to wear the club colors, support the club, support our brands, but without actually having to scream football in the office or at the birthday or what it might be. Yeah. So that's just one sort of concrete example, but the whole mindset behind it actually, how can we become a bigger part of the everyday life of the fans?
I think that's a really smart approach, specifically for football fans, because I do believe, well, for a number of different sports fans, like, if you're wearing something that is very specific FC Co, or if it's very specific, whatever hat I'm wearing today, I don't know what I'm wearing actually. Nets. Is it the Nets? Yeah. You are by default associated with that club. And if they are going through a shitstorm themselves, or if they are, maybe there's a bad player trade. Wait a second, player trade. The reset. I got to defrag my brain tomorrow. Then you go along with it as a person who's wearing the brand. So to do it in a more subtle way also gives that person a ability to stay connected, but also get away with something that's maybe like, oh, it's not out in the open fully that I'm a hardcore FC Co fan. I'm just doing it in a nice subtle way because, I don't want to scream it at the office. And also because my next door neighbor sitting on my desk is a Brøndby fan. Is a Brøndby fan. That's a good example. And it's like, I just don't want to, get into that topic, right? Yeah. So it's a good way. And I think it's a lot of brands can take notice of that more subtle, more sort of subdued versions of branding also can really benefit your brand.
And it gives, again, we talked relevance, it also gives you an opportunity to be relevant in more occasions than you are today maybe. So again, we're becoming relevant for grandma's birthday as an example. Maybe we weren't before because you wouldn't want to wear a football jersey or a big logo.
It's just not appropriate,
exactly,
unless your grandma's a huge fan. And she might be like,
okay,
yeah, exactly. Where's mine? That's what she's saying. Where's my jersey? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but it's also good for the community, I guess. It's also a statement, a subtle statement within the community, and more people might showcase it more besides the match when it is subtle and it's a part of, everyday life and stylish in a way.
Exactly, and I mean, you will always, and I'm seeing more and more like our shirts in the city, and I'm so happy every time I see it. But I'm also happy when I see the little subtle things that are actually maybe the two people walking around this person doesn't know, but I know. And that whole community part of it is also really cool.
Yeah, being in the know, the exclusive part of it. I mean, it's also nice. I think one of the tips that you didn't talk about, but I think is an important one, is like partnering with a Ledoux, like partnering with brands that maybe someone would be like, oh, I'm going to wear that because it's more aligned with what I would wear outside of the football club or to grandma's birthday. Then you also get an occasion where you're using some of their brand to actually infiltrate the other parts of their life, right? So it's a nice, I think it's a very good tip for those of you listening, is that it's not necessarily that your brand has to be out in front. It's like sometimes you can partner with somebody else that has already got that audience when they're not in your club. Then you can actually kind of infiltrate their life in a different way, which I think is
and that's
really
back
nice.
to the talk about partnerships is also something we look at. Of course, we talk both about sponsors and partners, but we're really focusing on partnership because we also need to get something out of it, so to speak.
Of course.
It's a partnership. So when we are working with a given brand, what does that give the FCK brand? Where is there something we want to move in a lifestyle direction? What would make sense to partner with if we are to go into a space where we're not the strongest today, but we can actually borrow something from a given brand? Yeah,
it's exactly what you're doing. What brands are doing for you, like when they come to you for a partnership, you're doing the same the other way. Precisely. Which is a smart move.
I want to touch upon the last topic, which is the community, obviously. Since you have such a big fan base on social media with thousands and thousands of followers on each platform, how do you connect with them? Like, how do you manage all these kind of channels when your audience is huge, your audience segment, and then but still keep all the activity going on so you stay relevant for different kind of target audiences?
Yeah. I mean, it's a big challenge. It's a lot of work, you guys know. Yeah. Actually, we don't have from an organizational level, we don't have one specific community manager supporting all these channels. Okay. We're doing it a bit of a different way, which sometimes is really good and other times is a challenge. But as we talked about, we have a pretty big organization. And of course, some people have a better expertise when we're talking social media than others. But we do have a more shared responsibility, but of course not on a strategic level, but in the everyday sort of it. Because I'm not, for example, when it's match day or we do a transfer, I'm not very close to that. Some of the guys are going, if we're playing an away game in Europe or something, we need to uphold the frequency and everything, but we also need to do it when we're talking commercial partnerships. And those two things are sometimes becoming quite separate, but we need it to be published in the same sort of style and tone and everything. And that's a big challenge for us, to be honest.
Yeah, the match day stuff versus the commercial stuff versus the everyday always on stuff.
Yes, and then you also have the whole corporate side of the business, both FC Copenhagen, but also Parken as the stadium. Yeah. So there's a lot of different stakeholders within this. But what we try to do, and something we haven't succeeded with yet, but we're working to, is of course to actually try to cater the content specifically for the given channel. That's something we're discussing a lot right now because we feel we could improve in that area. But of course also looking at new channels. And I just said it's a big challenge to actually manage the ones we have. And now we're talking new channels. And that's also why we try to be very thorough when we actually discuss, okay, are we going into this or not? And if we do, how are we going to approach it?
Yeah, I've noticed that you guys haven't really, maybe I'm wrong, but you haven't really tapped into TikTok yet. No. And that's obviously an area that we're really strong in, and we always it's interesting to see which brands have actually jumped on the boat and which haven't. But you're right in the sense, like, I think there's a big change that's going on with social media right now. We've talked about it many times on the podcast where, you know, brands are looking to do specific strategies per platform now because they are splitting, and we're also seeing an aging up of, you know, Facebook users versus maybe Instagram versus maybe Twitch for your guys' you know, e-games or whatever you guys are doing there versus YouTube versus et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So the one size fits all is not really where you want to be now. So it's like we're seeing a lot of brands consider what you're saying is like, how do we be relevant on each platform and
we
make
can definitely see in the performance side of it as well that there's a big difference between the channels and we, I mean, it's quite simple. You just have to accept it and look critically at it. So what is the message? What do we want to achieve again? And what channel is the best choice? And not necessarily publish everything at once in the same channel.
So it's not one size fits all.
And that's the same we have had, and as late as yesterday, a lot of discussions regarding TikTok. But again, one thing is seeing the brands that have actually jumped in early and built up a big following, but how do they approach it in terms of content compared to other channels is something we're really interested in. And if we are to go on TikTok, we of course want to nail it in terms of being really good at providing content that's catered to the
and you want to build a good channel that's also available to you commercially in the future for those brand partnerships. So you want to do it right, and I think it's not too late to kick ass there and to find your guys' specific voice and specific way of doing it, where people go, okay, FC Co, they're not just doing like, hey, let's get this football player to do a dance and like we'll call it a day, but you're actually like having a real strategic discussion about what should this be. And I think that's very, very smart. So,
So what performs the best within your community? Have you
I mean,
winning games. I mean, that's pretty.
What content like drives most results?
Or a transfer like yesterday with Mohamed Darami, something like signing
so
new players.
It's fans at the core, I guess.
Football at the core, I would say. So everything around the match day is something that really performs well, but also like getting behind the scenes of the club. Maybe from a specific player perspective or the club or something, we tend to in the content team once in a while we like try to find a lot of time to do big thorough documentary productions about a specific topic within the club, but also smaller pieces providing some like behind the curtain access. That is something that really performs well.
Nice.
But I mean, related to the games and players, new signings, everything is definitely something that performs well, and also an area where, of course, where we have to look at, okay, how do we then approach it, and also in terms of commercial partnerships and everything, what can we actually do, because we know this is coming.
Interesting.
But generally, I would say there's
I think BTS always works behind the scenes. It's a good, everyone wants to sort of be a voyeur in some senses and peek behind like what's actually going on there, and is it, you know,
you feel a part of it in a different way than just watching, you know, everything on top.
Also historic elements from the club is always like looking back at the best goals from a given legend or something like that is I mean,
so it's very football.
Historical.
It is.
It is very football at the core.
Nostalgia is a huge
huge
thing, right? So it's good that you're still tapping into that as well.
That's, again, if we can take that into the partnerships we do and use those elements, then we can actually get some of that traction into our commercial things as well.
You have 10 seconds.
Oy.
No, I'm kidding.
I talk fast, but not that fast. Okay. So here you have it, guys. I will now summarize the golden nuggets shared between Chris and Mads around how sports brands can live on digital. So we talked about what makes marketing in football, a football club, unique is the human factor in the club's performance, the fans, and the passion within the community. And the strategy behind the campaigns depends on the season, but you always lean back on the solid strategy behind the brand, the club, and what it represents. And the data and structuring of the data has really progressed over the years, and it really helps the brand tap into opportunity, like understanding the persona groups within the fan base and seeing what partnership could potentially exist. And then when it comes to partnerships, FC København is a trusted gateway for accessing very specific groups of people. So to have a successful partnership with brands, it is key to ask, what is the objective, and to get an understanding of the nature of the collaboration and what do we really want to achieve here long term and for the specific campaign. You always want to build something that solves problems. And the strategic considerations when working with partners is always rooted in what do you want to achieve, and find the right balance between the club's messaging and honor the partner's guidelines, basically. And lastly, you want to stay relevant by understanding that it may not be relevant for everyone in the whole fan base. So it takes guidance, mediating, and advice the brands properly in a successful partnership. So here have it. Mads Jefsen, Marketing Director at FC København, Football Club Copenhagen. Take on sponsorships and media campaigns for sports brands. Thank you guys for listening, and tune in for the next one.
Thanks a lot. See you.
This has been the Social Media Sucks Podcast.